Welcome to Interview with a Zombie. Today, Dr. Thomas Woods discusses his new book, Nullification. Dr. Woods holds a bachelor's degree in history from Harvard and his master's and PhD from Columbia University. And now, your host, a zombie.
Yes, I wrote this book called Nullification, and the argument in it basically is as follows, that right now our federal government basically does whatever it wants without any constitutional restraints, and in fact, if you raise the issue of the Constitution, you say, where do you get the authority to do thus and so, they laugh. They actually laugh at you. So I want to remind people of what Thomas Jefferson said, that if the federal government does something that's unconstitutional, you shouldn't enforce it. Obviously, if a law is unconstitutional, it's not a law at all. And he and Madison actually said in 1798 that the states were duty-bound to resist if the federal government went beyond its legitimate constitutional boundaries. Duty-bound to resist. And as a matter of fact, you can summarize Jefferson's argument really in just one sentence, which is that if the federal government is allowed to have a monopoly on determining what its own powers are, we have no right to be surprised when it keeps discovering new ones.
Neo-Confederate.
Well, actually, no. I think it's important to point out that northern states had recourse to these principles more often than southern ones did. So I think that's actually a misconception that you're operating on.
Slavery.
Well, no. Actually, nullification was never used on behalf of slavery. But you know what it was used on behalf of?
Slavery?
No. It was used on behalf of the cause of fighting the fugitive slave laws. Now, notwithstanding the fugitive slave clause in the Constitution, nevertheless, there were aspects of the fugitive slave law that was passed in 1850 that were constitutionally dubious, and numerous northern states did everything they could to obstruct the enforcement of that law. As a matter of fact, let me just quote for you from just one state, Wisconsin. The state legislature, the state Supreme Court fought against that. But here's just a handbill that was distributed on the streets of Milwaukee in the 1850s. And notice, it's arguing that the states can resist unconstitutional measures by the federal government. Listen to this. All the people of this state who are opposed to being made slaves or slave catchers and to having the free soil of Wisconsin made the hunting ground for human kidnappers, and all who are willing to unite in a state league to defend our state sovereignty, our state courts, and our state and national constitutions against the flagrant usurpations of U.S. judges, commissioners, and marshals and their attorneys, and to maintain inviolate those great constitutional safeguards of freedom, the writ of habeas corpus and the right of trial by jury, as old and sacred as constitutional liberty itself. And it goes on to say, all those who share these principles should gather for a mass meeting and take such action as the exigencies of the times and the cause of imperiled liberty demand. So I think it's really a mistake to associate these principles.
Racism.
No, I mean, did you hear what I just said? I think it's very important to understand this was used to defend blacks who had run away.
Racism.
Well, look, it's true. Racial oppression can occur at any level of government. When you're dealing with government, you're dealing with the most dangerous monopoly that has ever existed in history. But the point is that today, in 2010, when everybody has the right to vote, where are the greatest threats to our liberties coming from? Boise? Santa Fe? No, obviously not from places like that, but from Washington, D.C. As a matter of fact, look back to the 20th century. Where were the greatest outrages against the dignity of mankind perpetrated? In large centralized states. As a matter of fact, Hitler, for example. Hitler was... Yes, I know I said Hitler's name, but my point is that Hitler was a lifelong foe of states' rights because he saw states' rights as an obstacle to his exercise of absolute power. I mean, why wouldn't Hitler support states' rights? In fact, let me quote Hitler. This is Hitler from Mein Kampf, and I quote him in my book, Nullification. Here's Hitler saying the Nazis would totally eliminate states' rights altogether. And he goes on to say National Socialism, that's the Nazis, as a matter of principle, must lay claim to the right to force its principles on the whole German nation without consideration of previous federated state boundaries. So whose side is Hitler on? He certainly doesn't favor nullification. So if nullification is all about oppressing people, and states' rights are all about oppressing people, how come Hitler is such an opponent of it?
Neo-Confederate.
All right, let me come at this from a totally different angle. Let's look at the causes on behalf of which nullification was employed in the 19th century, beginning with 1798, the late 18th century, when it was first sort of codified, as it were, in the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions. What did Jefferson and Madison fight against in those resolutions? Well, they're fighting against violations of free speech by the federal government. So nullification is being used on behalf of free speech. It's used on behalf of free trade. It's used to fight against unconstitutional searches and seizures. It's used to fight against the prospect of military conscription, to fight against the prospect of children being enlisted in the military without the consent of their parents. And as we've seen earlier, it was used to fight against the fugitive slave law. So it's a complete, when you use terms like neo-Confederate, which is just like one of these sort of zombie terms, well, pardon me, I withdraw that statement. No, you're right. But it is one of these terms that people just throw out because they think it'll just shut down all debate. If I utter this term, no one will be able to continue debate. But I don't know. I think
Racism.
I'm thinking maybe we're really not making progress here. I mean, I'm trying to make arguments that are at least reasonably thought-provoking, and you're just throwing...
Racism.
Yeah, see, you're just throwing code words at me and scary-sounding propaganda words. See, that's not an argument. That does not count as an argument. I've already answered all this. No, that is not a substitute for an argument. You try to do this all the time to people, and this has got to stop. The zombies are doing too much of this. This has got to stop. We have to have real arguments. If you're just going to sit there and throw words at me instead of making an argument, I mean, if you're not even going to use your brain.
Brains.
You've been watching Interview with a Zombie. Join us next week for another enlightening episode.